Commissioners, we have two topics for you today. One, we're going to let Tim introduce Dr. Jeff Etling and Kevin Arnell on talk about the zoo, give an executive director's report, and we'll also have Kevin Stamper talk about the air ambulance resolution that will be presented next week on the agenda. So without further ado, unless you have any opening comments that you want to make.
Well, first of all, I want to appreciate everyone's flexibility today. There was a little scheduling snafu this morning, so this will work fine. I think we'll get everything done we need to do, but I appreciate the flexibility.
Absolutely. Tim?
Good morning, Commissioners. Dr. Jeff Etling has been with the zoo for just over a year now. The last 6 months or so, he's been working with some folks on a strategic master plan, and so he is here to do a little update. And Kevin Arnell, the Zoological Society Board Chair, is here as well to provide some support and insight. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Etling.
Absolutely. Good morning, everyone. My name's Kevin Arnell. I'm the board chair of the Sedgwick County Zoological Society, and appreciate the opportunity to just visit with you briefly this morning. As Tim said, Dr. Etling joined us about a year ago, and it's been a busy, exciting year for us at the zoo. But my comments, I really wanted to just focus on a couple of things right quick. The first is just to say thank you to the board and staff for your support over this past year. It's been a great year. The opportunity to have that stable operating funding agreement has been very helpful to us. It's helped us begin to work on that backlog of infrastructure and improvement issues that we had maintaining our zoo property, so that's been really important. And secondly, it's allowed us to plan a little bit for the future. And so, consistent, I think, with some of the county's activities over the last several months or year, we too have been engaged in some strategic planning and are kind of excited to have that come together this fall. And of course, we'll keep you involved and informed as part of that process as well. So, as we, and Jeff will certainly talk a little more about that process, but my main purpose for being here today was just to say thank you for your support and your leadership. The zoo is an important resource for our community. We know the community supports us. We value the trust they put in us to really kind of take the zoo to the next level. So we'll look forward to working with you again as we have for almost 50 years, I guess, as a community partnership, and sure do appreciate your support and leadership.
Okay. Well, as Tim mentioned, we have been undertaking a combined strategic master planning process this year. My history over the past 31 years of working with zoos is that those have traditionally been done as two separate entities, and then they don't meet in the middle and work together. So we've tried to do it as one process, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But I want to give you a couple other updates really quickly. Can everybody hear me all right? Okay, good. So first of all, I just kind of want to give you an update of where we're at as of the end of June in terms of employees. We have 311 employees at the zoo right now, 221 full-time and 190 part-time and temporary. Since the beginning of the year, we've hired 94. I've got a couple of them, photos of a couple of our newest ones on the right there. At the bottom, Jay McClorian, who may be familiar to some of you here, he just retired last year from Sedgwick County Sheriff's Department. So we're really happy to have him on board as our head of security, because we're taking a deep dive look at our security at the zoo in terms of what that might look like moving forward. And so I think he's going to be instrumental in helping us with that. If you haven't heard, we have a new bull elephant at the zoo that arrived in early May. His name is Ajani. You would think that he's lived here his entire life, because, as we like to say, it's been very boring, which is very good. This happened in mid to late May, where they did the first introduction of Ajani with the girls in Titan, and you can't mistake him for any other elephant out there when you see him next to the others. He's about 9'6" at the back, which puts him at 2 foot taller than Stephanie, who's 47 years old and has been at the zoo basically her entire life. And he weighs about 9,500 pounds, so he's about 2,000 pounds heavier than Stephanie too. So when he's in the barn by himself, he looks relatively small to a lot of people, but when you see him with the other elephants, you can't mistake him. This past week, we've actually had him with the whole entire herd, which has gone very well. He was out there with them yesterday. This was 2 weeks ago when he was introduced to Stephanie on the right and Simunye for the first time. And like I said, it's gone very, very well. We expect that it's possible within the next 2 years that we could have our first baby elephant on the ground. Simunye is the likely mother. She comes into cycle again at the end of this month, so we'll see what happens. And they cycle about every 3 months, so if this one doesn't take, we've got other opportunities. But then you don't hold your breath because it's a 22-month gestation. It's probably one of the longest in the animal kingdom. Kind of in that same regards, we will be hosting the Association of Zoo and Aquarium Elephant Taxonomic Advisory and Species Survival Plan meeting next week. We'll have all the major players from zoos in the U.S. and university researchers that work with elephants here in the United States at the zoo. For many of them, it will be the first time they've ever been to Wichita or the Sedgwick County Zoo. So I think that we're going to find out that they're going to be very impressed with the zoo and with the community, and so we're looking forward to hosting our colleagues. If you've been over to the Tropics recently, one of the things you will have noticed that I don't have a photo of here, but we put in a new ADA accessible path this year. It historically has been a mulch path. We were having some disease issues with our birds last year that we discovered was from toxoplasmosis that was coming in with the mulch. The raccoons and the possums and the cats were using it as a latrine, and then it was becoming a problem for our birds. So when we started looking at the options, sterilized mulch was about $40,000 a year, so you can start to see where that's going, and it was about a $70,000 outlay just to put in a permanent stamped path and to get it to ADA grade. So next year we're planning to put automatic doors in the front, and it'll make it a totally ADA accessible building. The other thing that we've done this year is completely renovated the life support system for the Tropics Lake, which was just completed within the last couple of weeks. Fish and turtles are going back into the lake, as well as some theming. Our exhibits crew, which I would put up against any in the zoo world here in the U.S., built some outstanding fiberglass logs that are providing not only dimension for the exhibit, but places for the animals to hide as well. You may have also noticed, if you've been out recently, that between the bistro and the pavilion, where the smokehouse has been located, we've been doing a lot of updating there with what we're tentatively calling the Pavilion Patio. It may get a more permanent name than that. But this is an area that we can rent for parties and other events. In fact, we already have it rented for Jubilee in September. If it's not rented for a party, we can open up the gates from either end and let our guests use it as a picnic area. And this is being done all in-house by our maintenance staff. You may also remember that back in May, in conjunction with Party for the Planet, which is for Earth Day, that we launched our Green Today, Sustain Tomorrow's campaign. As a conservation organization, we realize that everything that we do in our day-to-day business practices impacts wildlife and wild places. And so we feel like we need to set the example in what we do at the zoo and be good stewards of the planet right here in Wichita, Kansas. So we're switching to compostable plates in our restaurant. The material that we're using, that's in the upper right-hand photo, is made from fallen palm leaves, and we can actually compost it with our animal waste, and it will break down in a maximum of 90 days. So it sends the right signal to our guests that they can make these good eco-friendly choices at home as well. In some regards, it's also going to save us money, which is great for our operating budget. Then on to the strategic master plan. One thing I will say up front is that we probably have done this in a different fashion than any other AZA zoo or aquarium here in the U.S. And I think that our consultants from Zoo Advisors based in Philadelphia may have thought that I lost my mind when I said I want to involve the entire full-time staff. But that has worked so well that they've become believers in it that I think that it'll be the model moving forward for other zoos. So every workshop, we've had all 121 full-time employees invited to participate, as well as the board. We have a smaller core working group that kind of gets into the details. It's made up of 23 individuals, 7 of those being from the board. But what I'm going to show you next is actually the result of 3 workshops that's had all that buy-in from the very beginning and is allowing us to come up with what I think is a very cohesive strategic master plan that will kind of be the roadmap for the next 5 to 15 years. 5 years for the strategic part, probably 15 for the master plan portion. The most recent thing that we accomplished was with GLMV zoos. They're based right here in Wichita, as you may know. They've done most of the designing of the zoo over the last 25 years. They've been helping us with a master plan. In late May, we did a design charrette where we had 40 people from our team on 5 different teams, so about 8 to a team, where we really focused on looking at the older exhibits in the zoo, but also how do we increase guest experience, create that real wow factor at the zoo, make us a destination. So a lot of that involved putting in revenue generators that we don't have currently, which will help us with some of our business operations moving forward. So I think when you see what will come out of this later this fall, it'll be very dynamic, not only in terms of what some of the animal exhibits look like, because due to the fact that we have such abundance of space, what we did for elephants is what we want to do for a lot of other species. So instead of having both grizzly bear and black bear in the future, we may just have grizzly bear with an exhibit space that's 2 to 3 times larger than what they have now. So I think it's going to be very dynamic when it's presented, but also a lot of features that will be of interest to our guests as well. The third strategic workshop was held in mid-June. It's where we started to really refine things that came out of the first 2 workshops, and namely the mission statement and the vision statement. And what I've come to learn over 30 years is that if you make it too long, nobody's going to remember it. And so the one that has really resonated with our team is what you see here on the screen: Sedgwick County Zoo, caring, connecting, conserving now and for generations to come. And I think that'll probably be what the final product will look like. Our vision statement was kind of buried. No one even knew we had a vision statement. That's what we really aspire to be moving forward. And this is the one that really touched everyone in terms of what they think we should be moving forward. We want to be a global leader in conservation and to inspire others to protect the world's wildlife and wild places. We also did a survey monkey with the entire zoo staff and with the full board in terms of core values. These aren't meant to replace the county's values. They're meant to be specific to the zoo and complement the county's values. But these really kind of touched everyone at the zoo in terms of what they think we should be as an organization in terms of integrity, operational excellence, sustainability, caring, and community. We are a community asset, and we want to make sure that we stay there and provide what our community is expecting. From the first workshop, where we had a SWOT analysis, really is where the strategic goals that are going to be the kind of the mainframe of our plan came from. And so there's 5 things that really resonated from that first workshop. We kind of delved into a little deeper. In the second one, we had 4 blue ribbon panelists that zoo advisors put together that were experts from other zoos in the first 4 areas here that were able to give us some good input on how they accomplish those things at their given institution. And so the 5 goals of our strategic plan are excellence in animal care, create wow, conservation impact, enhance awareness, and to grow our resources. So we're actually starting to flesh those out with specific objectives right now, and when this is kind of unveiled later this fall, that will be available for everyone to see what these actual strategic goals are going to look like moving forward. So in September, we think it may be mid to late September, zoo advisors and GLMV will come and give a presentation to the full zoo staff and board at the same time of what they think our strategic master plan should look like. And at that point, then we'll take it to the full board for approval. So we think probably in October or early November, we'll have a completed strategic master plan. And I think the other thing that is really a benefit by having everyone involved in this process is that when the day comes that we've said this is what we're accepting as our strategic master plan, the rubber has to hit the road. And so by having everybody in the know from the very beginning, we're not going to have to play a lot of catch up to get everybody on the same page. And they've been a part of this entire process, and we can really start moving forward in a very fast and efficient way. And with that, that's my kind of brief report of where we're at with strategic master planning. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have at this time.
Doctor, thank you very much for being here today, and Kevin, thank you for joining us. We're very proud of our zoo. We're proud of the partnership that we have between Sedgwick County and the zoo. And with that, I think we ought to open it up and see if any of our commissioners have any questions at all.
I have just one question. Thank you for the presentation. But the 94 new employees, that was a bigger number than I expected. Is this normal to have that many?
A lot of that is from the society side that we hire temporary seasonal employees, particularly when our season ramps up in the spring through this time of the year. So that's normal. A lot of the college kids come to work for us, during the summer months, that they would be part of that.
Okay. I'm looking at some of your older numbers. It seems like the FTE count has gone up, at least on the commission or the county side as well, but obviously not that many. So again, I guess my thought would be that the zoo's overall doing pretty well. I like what you presented today. I think it's, can I use the word thriving?
Yes, thank you.
I think that's a good word.
Yeah, I think the only thing that's hurting us this year, but it's not only us, it's zoos across the country, is this extreme temperatures. We're about 13.2% what we projected to be in terms of attendance. But the people that are coming are spending money, which is good. The comparison I like to give is the free zoo that I came from in St. Louis are exactly at the same point in terms of attendance right now. So it doesn't matter if it's free admission or you charge, people just aren't going out in the heat. So we're trying to compensate for that in terms of our business operation to make sure we stay in a good financial place.
Good. All right. Thank you for the presentation. Very, very well done.
Any other questions from the commissioners? What's the next big thing we're going to see at the zoo?
Well, I think that what will probably come out of the master plan portion is one thing we know we need is a new entry. We're living with a 1971 entry that was built for maybe 100,000 people, and we're 580 plus, and trying to get them through there in a timely fashion. We know that first initial experience makes a big difference. So we're probably going to be looking at a new entry as well as administration. We've been down in that kind of octagon-shaped building on the corner since the beginning, but we're going to try to move administration down to the front of the zoo as well. So I think we'll see that. I think we might see a couple revenue generators as part of that first project too, in terms of maybe an event center, also a train. We've talked for years about a train 10 minutes up the road, one most of the zoos in the country use, made right here in Wichita, Kansas. So we're looking at putting in a train here. And then probably in terms of animal exhibits, the old Amur leopard exhibit, which was originally tigers, when it was built back in '74, has really outlived its usefulness. So we're looking to build something a little more dynamic and spacious for them. So probably those are four things that will be part of probably the first wave that we're going to be looking at.
Good. Well, I think a train is a good idea, by the way, but I've spent a lot of time going up to Omaha since I have a son that lives up there, so I've been to their zoo a number of times, and they've got a line every time to get on the train there. Memorial Day, I was down in Oklahoma City and went over to their zoo. I thought their train was kind of interesting, and the fact that it actually goes into an enclosure where that you've got animals inside the enclosure where you go. They got gates that open and close as the train goes through, which is kind of a cool idea. So I think that you're on the right track. I'm very happy that we have you as our director over there. I think the board made a very wise decision. I think the zoo is on the right track, as I said. And I look forward to great things to come.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having us, and thank you for your support.
And you're welcome to stay if you want to be bored, or you
Might take the opportunity to
Thanks for coming.
All right, next subject, we'll talk about the air ambulance resolution. I'll let Eric introduce Kevin and say anything he wants to say.
There's Kevin, all right. And Dr. Gallagher's here, and anyone else who wants to visit about it. But maybe we can kick it off with Kevin, his request from commissioners about you.
I think I've already given everybody a copy of the draft resolution, but I'll give you another one.
Thank you.
What this is a resolution where we would coordinate more greatly with air ambulance services that operate within Sedgwick County as far as their ability to go and retrieve patients within the borders of the county. We used to have a contract with at least two different businesses that provided this service. That phased out somewhere in the neighborhood of 2010, 2012. We had actual contracts as the county with these providers. They were providing 5 or 6 pickups a year during the period that we had contracts with them, it seemed like. And there was never any commission action was taken to prohibit the use or anything of the air ambulance service in the county. But after the contracts were allowed to expire, there wasn't any coordination with 911 or anything like that. Commissioner Howell requested that we go ahead and investigate as to why that was, determine what the status of air ambulance service in Sedgwick County would be. There is no prohibition against them picking up patients within the county. However, there's no coordination with 911 to alert them when there is going to be a call that they might need to respond to in one of the farther out areas of the county. So this resolution is intended to go ahead and address those matters.
Commissioner Howell?
Thank you. I guess I was surprised to find out that we did not allow air transport services in Sedgwick County. And again, for my district, I have the smallest geographic area. It's probably less important to District 5, but I know that getting more timely service out to Western Sedgwick County ought to be across the board, across all commissioners ought to be concerned about that. We're talking about enhancing that in the near future. I know that's true, but historically, when they used to allow the Eagle Med, and I think there's another company as well, to operate, they only they generally would transport somewhere between 5 and 10. Let's just say 5 and 10 per year. And for those 5 to 10, we probably, again, had we transported them, we may have done a good job, and maybe everything would turn out fine. But I think there's some cases where things don't turn out well, and sometimes time is of the essence. And so, in terms of billing, I don't think it's a significant impact on Sedgwick County budget in either way. I guess my thought would be is that there are sometimes this is going to be necessary. They've proven their usefulness in the past, and I just think for us to coordinate with them to essentially allow them with some coordination and some protection to the county, we ought to at least allow them to do it. Now, this isn't going to cost the county, again, in terms of a few less transports, yes, that'll be a tiny cost to the EMS budget. But in terms of liability, that's what this is to protect. Correct me if I'm wrong. This establishes liability and how we communicate and how we coordinate with them. The billing that if they provide a service, the billing between them and their client is completely on their shoulders. If they collect or don't collect, that's not our business. We don't. It's a private sector issue at that point. So I can't think of a reason not to do this. I'll just tell you on a personal level. I guess I'll get real personal here. There was a time back when I lived in Derby, and my mom was about to marry a guy, and he got accidentally shot at the corner of 63rd and Rock Road. Now back then we didn't have EMS station on Rock Road to the south of that. I'm sorry, to the south of that. We didn't have the EMS station there on Oliver. Those didn't exist, and so. At that time, I think it was a Life Watch helicopter, which was dispatched to him. He was rapidly bleeding to death and needed to get into an operating room. And so they dispatched a helicopter, they picked him up, and he died on the way to the hospital. But that wasn't a very short trip back then. Now, I think most of our transports, correct me if I'm wrong, but most of our transports, I think, were not, in the last few years that they operated, probably weren't in District 5. Probably more like in District 3, Commissioner Dennis's district. Because it's remote from most of our EMS stations. We place our stations based on call volume and population, not so much on geographic location. So there are places in the county that are not accessible quickly by EMS. And by the way, Dr. Hadley, I want to tell you, I commend you. You do a tremendous job. I love our EMS. I think it's one of the best in the nation. And I'll continue to say that. We've got great staff. And Dr. Gallagher, you do a tremendous job. I'm a huge fan. I've said that before. This is not any type of criticism to any of our other system. But if you're bleeding to death and you're in the corner of the county, I think you're going to want to get to a hospital pretty quickly. I have another friend. He actually came and did the invocation a few weeks ago. I didn't even know he was coming. I remember him because years ago, I knew he almost died. And I think he was not too far from a hospital. And I think if I remember correctly, I think his spleen ruptured inside his body. And he was internally bleeding to death. Thankfully, he wasn't very far from an operating room. When they checked his blood pressure, it was essentially 0. That was undetectable. He was essentially dead, and I mean, he had no blood pressure. They had to do exploratory emergency surgery in an operating room and they cut him open, his entire body cavity full of blood spilled on the floor of the operating room. They gave him like 30 transfusions, but they saved his life. The reality is there are people in the corners of the county that sometimes need to get to an actual hospital, not just an ambulance. These folks operate from Wichita to Wesley Hospital, and maybe other places, I don't know, to every other surrounding county. They also operate fixed wing transports. They transport people anywhere in the nation for operations and procedures, and sometimes all kinds of things, and sometimes even internationally. They provide their transport service. And so they operate out of Wichita. Once again, I'll continue to say I'm proud of Wichita for our acceptance and embracement of everything that deals with aircraft in any way. I think it doesn't make sense to me that we would somehow preclude a transport from being able to operate in Sedgwick County that potentially would save a life. I think if the public knew that we were not willing to allow this happen, I think they would be disappointed in that. So I created I asked for this resolution as a way to protect the county, to set up the way we would relate to these airport transport services. I think this is the right thing to do. It's not going to substantially change anything else we're doing. It's a very small number of people that will get transported, but for those people, it could be a life-saving, critical life outcome, whether they survive or they don't survive. And it's not up to us, in my opinion, to simply say, if you're on the corner of the county and it takes 15, 20 minutes to get there and 15, 20 minutes to get back, that's an acceptable service. I don't think it is. There are places in the county that are like that. Imagine, if you will, someone is in a car accident, they're being cut out of the vehicle by our fire district. You could have an ambulance. And by the way, we would never dispatch an air ambulance without dispatching a mobile EMS ambulance at the same time. We don't know the situation, so that they might both be standing by, and they can make a decision whether they can safely transport that person to the hospital or time is of the essence. And so if it's time is of the essence, they can put them in their transport and transport them. I don't think that we're going to not go to a call because of this. I think we have to go to every call like we do now. And if they can get there quickly, and if it's necessary for them to get someone to the hospital quickly, that's a decision that can be made, and we ought to allow this to happen. So again, between 5 to 10 times per year potentially. The greatest benefactor of this would be Western Sedgwick County, and I think we ought to pass the resolution and certainly allow this type of service to happen. That's my strong opinion. I'd like to introduce Chuck Welch. He is the Director of Fixed Wing Services at Eagle Med, and the other person's name is Jason Jenkins. Jason Jenkins. He's the Director of Rotor Wing Services, in other words, helicopters. They do operate a number of Beach King airplanes out of that facility out by the airport, and they do have Eagle Med that, I guess it is Eagle Med, that basically, if the weather is conducive, if they're not already on another call, they can receive a call and respond. But it's always their choice. If they can't go because there's mechanical problems, or if the weather's not conducive, or whatever reason, they don't have an obligation to respond. I think we do. But there are times where they can respond. We ought to allow them, I guess, the right to operate in Sedgwick County, and that's all this does. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Dr. Gallagher, I received a note from you, 2 pages long, not quite a note, that expressed your opinion on this matter. Would you like to bring everyone up to speed on what you wrote?
Happy to. So, several months ago, I had a very nice meeting with Commissioner Howell that's bringing this issue to light and talking about the potential value of expanding use of air ambulance within county. After which gave me an opportunity to look into some of the details of this and was quite enlightening. I had heard the institutional knowledge of prohibition on air ambulance within the county. I hadn't thought much of it, as a system like ours is expected to have fairly low utility from air ambulance, but never really looked into it. So after this meeting, so thank you, Commissioner, for bringing that to light, I did dig into the details and I was happy to find that it's not the case. We, in fact, do have process in place for how and when to utilize air ambulance, and there is, in fact, not a prohibition on this. In fact, we have fairly detailed policies that exist within 911 communications, as well as a medical protocol that has been approved by the Medical Society for exactly how and when to utilize them. So that was encouraging, and made me feel that if we do find that small likelihood of a patient that would benefit from this unusual process, that there is nothing to stop us from it. That's not to say that we shouldn't perhaps look into that policy and make sure that it's been optimized. I don't think there is anything in the resolution before us that hinders that, although I think we should be prepared for, if we do look into it, that we discover our systems are already up to standard. So when looking into the questions that came before us, the first question was, is there any sort of prohibition? This very simple answer to that is no. The second question is much more difficult because it centers around medical appropriateness. And in looking into the authoritative literature on use of air ambulance, the true authority on this is the American College of Surgeons Committee on Trauma. These are the injury, death, and dying experts, and when we talk about getting a patient rapidly to the operating room, we're talking about getting them to a surgeon. So their paper, in fact, seems to have been copied and pasted into the Medical Society protocols. They took the criteria directly, word for word, in fact, including a typo that I noticed was also transcribed directly into our process. But nonetheless, it says that our policies are in perfect alignment with the national standards for use of air ambulance. So those two issues together, we do not have a prohibition on the use, and it does appear that our medical care is up to standard. So that is what you have before you as a formal medical opinion.
So I guess my question is this resolution required then? We can do everything that we need to do right now, is what you're telling us. Do we need a resolution in order to be able to keep doing what we're doing?
I will admit that I'm not an expert on the reading of resolutions or legal language, but I personally have not been able to identify in that we are either not able to do now or currently doing now. But I would defer that to operational experts.
And as far as 911, is everything in place right now that if we needed an air ambulance that you could respond?
Absolutely.
Mr. Chairman, attached to I give each of you a couple of pieces of paper. Attached to that is 911 protocol, detailed about a page and a half. I'll let Laura speak to that.
Yeah, it's protocols on how to call them out when they're on standby, a flying standby versus a stationary standby. We've worked with their team through the years to make sure that we have hashed out this protocol. I would agree that it probably needs to have another pair of eyes. I think there's some new management over the dispatch there, if I'm correct, within the past couple of years. And so it's a good opportunity to revisit that and make sure that we are still in agreement with how that will work, but we train our staff on it. I feel very comfortable with 911's role in notifying an air ambulance service when requesting from the field.
So procedures and protocol are in place today without a need for a resolution.
Correct.
Okay. Dr. Gallagher, I did speak to Dr. John McMaster yesterday.
My condolences. He's a very good friend of mine.
Very good. Tell everyone who he is, if you will.
So Dr. John McMaster is the chair of the Medical Society Physician Advisory Committee, which is the functional subset within the larger medical society that deals with EMS issues. They are the group of physicians throughout the community who hear issues with patient care and produce the primary level of approval for Sedgwick County protocols, which are then elevated to the full board for full approval.
Good. And I'm not a doctor, so I can't tell you exactly what his opinion is, but from my lay interpretation of what he said is he felt that all protocols and procedures are in place today that we could utilize it if it was ever necessary. Is that your
opinion? Yes.
Okay. Are you able to call them 24 hours a day, 7 days a week?
Absolutely.
Okay. And they're ready to respond 24/7?
If they've got a crew available and are able to assist, we've never had them tell us no if unless they didn't have approved it.
Okay. I guess it's more appropriate to ask the air ambulance service folks, but what's the cost if we're going to go to Cheney? If you're going to fly out, where are you flying from? You're flying from Eisenhower?
Correct.
That's where you're based, and that's where you'll be based in the future?
Yes.
Okay. And if we need to send you to Cheney, what would it cost to the patient?
I wouldn't be able to quote it right here, right now. They vary. Mileage, where we're going, what hospital we're transporting to. It truly varies. So, again, that is between the patient and our company. So, to his point, there wouldn't be any cost to Sedgwick County whatsoever. But we're contracted with many different insurance companies and have negotiated rates with them. So it kind of varies based upon, the insurance and that sort of thing.
Well, I guess you didn't answer my question at all. So let me press the question a little bit. If I've got someone that's in Cheney right now, and we're going to deploy one of our ambulances out there, if we pick them up and transport them, latest I heard somewhere around $1,000, something like that.
Sure.
So can you give me kind of a ballpark?
I would estimate around 30.
Around $30,000.
Yeah.
Okay. And some of that would be picked up by their insurance carrier.
Sure.
But then they might be responsible for quite a bit of that.
Depends. Again, we're in network, let's say, with Medicare. So Medicare, we have a negotiated rate with them. Whatever they are paying us, that's what we accept, and the rest is written off.
Okay. The other question I have is, I truly believe that there is a significant niche for you all, for us, in a disaster. That is probably the most important point where we might need you.
Sure.
How many assets would you have if we had a disaster?
So the company the parent company of EagleMed is also known as American Medical Group Holdings. We have the national contract with FEMA, and in the event that there are natural disasters, which we got deployed last year for hurricanes and that sort of thing, we're able to allocate many resources: air helicopters, airplanes. Again, just kind of depending upon what the nature of the emergency is. We've been deployed to tornadoes before, but the communities suffer very many different things. But you would definitely have the access to those. I was actually in the Houston area, Temple area, when those hurricanes went through there, and I counted 20 helicopters and 30 airplanes, and that we were able to mobilize that, over the course of about a 24-hour period. So we had the FEMA director in there, and his comment was, "You guys deploy them faster than the military does." So he was extremely impressed with how quickly we were able to get those resources there. But again, we're contracting with other providers as well to be able to commit to having as many as you might need.
Okay. And how quick can you respond in case of a disaster?
We were there overnight.
Overnight.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Do you see any reason from your aspect that we would need a resolution in order to be able to do the things we can do right now?
I honestly don't know the answer to your question or the history, within Sedgwick County, and would definitely defer to Dr. Gallagher and his research on the subject matter. We currently have a great relationship with Dr. Gallagher and the Sedgwick County Medical Society. Our protocols are approved by them. Meet with them. We're currently, we have a medical director as well, Dr. Greg Feynman, who's a local ER physician within Sedgwick County. We've been here since the 80s, so we're invested in the community. We hire many of the Sedgwick County EMS employees. So the elite of Sedgwick County EMS are working with us at EagleMed, and are familiar with one another within the system as it is.
Okay.
I think, Commissioner, if I might add, one of the things I think that raised a concern in our minds was when I came here 6 years ago, it was sort of this tribal knowledge that Sedgwick County really didn't call air ambulance. You do have a fantastic, robust ground system, and so I started looking back in the numbers, and I pulled that I thought I would just share with the commission. And it seemed like, and I was new, and so I just wanted to get a little history. I have 6 of these. And these are calls. The times that we were contacted from 2011 forward. And so when I ran, these are requests. These aren't actual transports. But when I see this, to me it says there's something happened. We did something wrong. They're upset with us, or something deteriorated in the relationship. And so 6 years ago, these numbers, this deterioration of the coordination between us and Sedgwick County started us on this journey. And so through that, we uncovered that I think there's just a philosophy that with your fantastic ground, you can take care of everything. And having worked in the medical community, I think for those very peripheral areas, there might be a tool in your toolbox that's just not being utilized. We certainly know that everything inside and closer is very well taken care of. These guys are fantastic. But that Cheney area, just the outer reaches, time, speed, distance, we can be an asset for you.
Okay. Scott, do you have anything you want to say?
Sure. Just to put that in context, several years ago, just give some history of why you may see a decline in those numbers is back in 11 and 12 when Dr. Braithwaite was here, was our medical director, started looking at the literature that was out. There was a lot of literature and studies done in the 80s that indicated air ambulance transport may be advantageous. Well, there have been subsequent studies later in years where that might not necessarily be the case, where it enhanced or improved patient outcomes in all those situations. So she was looking at that and made some determinations back then that we may have been overutilizing, over-triaging patients in that regard and transporting them by air ambulance where it really wasn't necessary, and really the patient outcomes weren't any different. And there's been multiple case studies that she referenced that I have a copy I can provide you that provided that data that made her render that particular decision, and working with the medical society to ensure our protocols are still in place. As far as the resolution, I don't believe it's necessary either to continue what we're doing today. It already allows us to use either Eagle Med or Life Team. They're both here locally in the community. If we see it's advantageous on a multiple patient scene, for example, where we have multiple patients in a remote area, that may be advantageous. But I think it's few and far between when you would be utilizing that resource, especially in Sedgwick County, when our transport times are typically 30 minutes or less from anywhere in the county. So you have to have the time factor in there. Is it substantially improve that time factor and patient outcome? And we have to answer that through the literature. And not just, well, we believe it's going to save time. And if you're in the middle of Cheney, you can't just land a helicopter in the middle of Cheney if you're at a residence. You have to go with a ground ambulance. You have to take them from point A over to a football field, for example, and then allow that, which adds time to that. If they're combative, that has to be taken care of at the scene before they're loaded in that helicopter for safety issues. So there's significant delays that can occur with those situations. Everyone has to be looked at on a case-by-case basis. You just can't have a blanket policy that says every critical patient in this part of the county needs to be flown in. That may not be the case. So we have to utilize that literature to help guide our policies, which I believe we have in place and are the most current that is out there in the literature. So I think that's why you see the decline and the de-emphasis on air ambulance. She believed we were overutilizing that asset.
But we're also, and it's been a concern of mine ever since I've been on the commission, is being able to get out to Cheney and Mount Hope. And I've expressed it numerous times.
Correct.
But what are we doing to sell that?
Right. We are adding a resource potentially next year.
In the budget we've got for Station 39, we're at a resource.
So we are looking at addressing the problem going out into the far western portions of Sedgwick County. Now, I guess I don't understand how we get to the point we know that we need an air ambulance. Is there already an ambulance on site or a fire department on site? How do we make that decision? And it might be part of 911 needs to help answer that question, but how do we get to the point where we know we need an air ambulance?
The current protocol specifies that it has to be a critical patient. And it's up to the on-duty supervisor to put that, if they get indications that it is a critical patient, to put
That supervisor is at 911 or your
EMS supervisor.
Okay.
Makes that determination that it's potentially a life-threatening situation, it's a critical patient in the far reaches of the county, and they can place the air ambulance on standby through 911. And once we get further information, whether that be a first responder or the ambulance gets there and determines, yes, indeed, it meets the criteria that's specified in here, that air ambulance can be launched to the scene. And again, there's other dynamics with that. Obviously, you have to have a landing zone set up. You have to have personnel assigned to that. You have to have good air-to-ground communication for safety. And certainly it makes a difference, day, night. It adds a layer of complexity when you're utilizing that resource.
And
I'm not saying it's not advantageous to do so, but you have to make that on a case-by-case basis.
And you can communicate air to ground?
Correct.
We have radios in our ambulances. I'll be darned. See, I learned something again.
If you don't have that communication, they shouldn't land. I mean, it's not safe if you don't have that type of communication, because you may see something from the ground they don't see from the air. And obviously at night, that even further complicates it for a night scene flight.
Okay.
Is it 800?
It's an 800 megahertz radio, yes.
So, Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
this system is already working. So approximately 6 weeks ago, we had an air resource request actually just outside of Derby. There was a fairly horrific appearing car accident that involved a large truck and a smaller truck. And the initial units on scene felt that the patient met the criteria to be flown by helicopter. They initiated the process. They got the field supervisor to approve the launch. They did so. Communication processes started, and additional information was collected about the patient as the fire district was able to cut them out of the vehicle and a more detailed assessment was performed, at which point they learned that the patient was not as bad as they had originally feared, and they were able to call off the cavalry. So, in fact, this system is working in the system and is available to people in all districts, even District 5.
Speaking, and I don't mean to speak for your protocols and Eagle Med, but when we call them and put them on standby, your crew's in the aircraft, it's going, it's ready, and then we also have, and you'll see the language in our protocol for a flying standby. So waiting for those eyes on the ground on the patient to make that determination doesn't mean they're going out and starting it up cold and getting going. They're ready to go, and the response once we activate is pretty rapid, no matter where we are in the county with it. And so very often we're calling before we even have first responders out with the patient, just because the nature of the call, the description that we're getting from 911 callers sounds pretty gruesome and traumatic, and so they're getting that notification well before we have anybody with hands or eyes on the patient.
Okay, and so you're just standing by waiting for our supervisor to say, yes, we need that asset.
Correct. The crews are getting into, and again, I don't mean to speak for your procedures, they're getting onto our radio channels, getting ready to fly. By the time that we have a crew member in the field that says, yes, go ahead and launch Eagle Men, most likely they're on the channel responding anyway. We're not even having to call them. But of course, we have that protocol in place if they're not. And we're getting landing zones going, TAC channels going for that. And I feel like it's a fast-moving process once the trigger is pulled.
Okay.
One further comment I might add, I think that Mr. Hadley raised some really good points about time and the sensitivity of time getting to these critical patients. And, the supervisory approval, all those things add time. We can help correct that by early launch, getting us in the air. It's a protocol that we've had in place. We started it 6 years ago when I joined Eagle Med. And if they will launch us and get us heading that way, if then they wave us off, so it would be like a more robust flying standby. If they call us off at that time, we go home. No, there's no charges incurred, which I think is maybe a misnomer that people think if we lift off, we start billing people. That's not the case. But early activation, getting us in the air, getting us headed toward the accident, especially out in the periphery where we're talking, that shrinks that window of time that we're all trying to negotiate.
Well, I don't have a problem with us looking at our protocols and seeing if there's something we can do to make sure that we do have early activation if we need them, so that they're standing by. I just don't understand why we need a formal resolution to make something happen that's happening.
May I ask a question?
Sure.
So it sounds like back in, Kevin said, it's back in 2010 or 2012, sometime in that time frame, the commissioners did not act. That we had a contract or a resolution that was allowed to expire.
Yes.
So we don't have anything right now. Am I right about that?
Right.
There's nothing right now. If we're operating without an agreement, which in my opinion exposes the county potentially. This sets it up so we have coordinated written agreement on how we relate to these folks. And in my opinion, limits our liability. It establishes how we will relate to each other. And, this expires in 5 years. It has a sunset built into it. We have to act to extend this one. But without a resolution, we don't have anything. And to the extent that we called them, you said called them to District 5 or this car accident, how many times since 2010 or 2012 have we, I see it here, but how many times has 911 contacted them and asked them to respond since, let's say, the last 5 years? It's been very low. Isn't that true?
I don't have numbers ready for you. I don't know if you have any numbers about your flight times versus notifications. I think you said that those are just notifications on your graphic.
Yeah, these are requests versus flights. So of the 100 back in 2011, I think we had 12 patients, and then it just steadily declined down to almost 0 today. And it's just sort of maintained. So actual contact, did you ask flight times or?
That's what you're wanting.
I guess my point is that
that
you say nothing's broken, everything's working greatly. I would argue I don't think that's true because they used to do 5 to 10 a year. Now they're doing essentially 0. So a question is something's changed. We don't have an agreement in place. I think the coordination's not happening. And again, I don't want to change. If the patient outcome is the same with a ground-based transport, great. That's the right answer. But if it does make a difference on someone's life, $30,000 is not something I'm concerned about. The risk is on them. If they make a transport, it has nothing to do with us. And they provide the service to everybody outside our own county. This is a typical type of thing that happens across the entire nation. For some reason, not in Sedgwick County. So I don't know. I feel like maybe something got sideways back in 2012 or sometime in that time frame, and we just decided we weren't going to continue down that path. And whether we made a resolution to stop it, I don't think that happened. Did we make a written statement to prohibit this? I don't think that happened. So yeah, it could happen. It's just not. We have nothing in place saying that we should, and here's how we're going to do it.
But I disagree that we have nothing in place. Take a look at the EMS dispatch policy 7.0. Take a look at, I don't have it here, but Dr. Gallagher, you said you've got procedures in place.
That's about to hand it to you.
Right there, that's our protocol.
Oh, we've got approach to traumatic injury procedures that are in place. We've got policies. If all this is in place right now, why do we need a resolution? All we've got to do is say, we think that this is something that we need to make sure that we keep on top of. There's no need for us to add more paperwork.
If everything is in place to do exactly what this does, I agree with you. I don't know. That's a legal question, I guess. I don't know if that's true. If somebody ought to do a legal review and verify, is everything that this does in place right now? And again, I have not talked to Dr. McMaster. I've not talked to the advisory committee. I didn't know that I should do that. But are they opposed to this, or they just don't think it's necessary? Or they think that everything's fine?
They don't think that beyond what we've got right now with procedures in 911 and procedures with our EMS, and the procedures that Dr. Gallagher has in place, we don't need anything additional.
Well, if nothing else, at least this discussion has spurred maybe a correction to what we've been doing, because the system has been broken. It hasn't been working for a few years. So if everything's in place to make it happen and we can get back on that path to do this service when necessary to save a life, that's fine. If that's not all going to happen, and if we don't have the proper paperwork in place to make that happen, then this resolution is necessary. So whatever it takes to make this service functional in Sedgwick County is the key. I don't know what it's going to take. If everything's in place, and you're telling me that's all good on a legal side, then you're right, we could drop it. But it has been broken for years. It has not been working for whatever reason. And so that's why I raised this resolution. The fact is, we had a contract at one time, or a resolution at some point that did expire, and the commission didn't take action. The question was, was that supplemental to the other things that were in place, or was it necessary at that time? We decided it wasn't necessary. We had other policies in place that took care of that already. I don't know why they let that expire, but it seems kind of like it was perhaps a little bit intentional, that they felt like they just didn't want to do this anymore. And
Well, I don't know that I agree that it's been broken, because we're transporting people every single day. Our EMS is doing a fantastic job. We're saving lives every day. There is absolutely nothing broken with our EMS system.
Mr. Chairman, I agree with you. That part of our ground-based service is doing a tremendous job. If they're in the process of transporting somebody from the corner of the county, and how long, again, I'm just imagining, I don't know where all the EMS stations are, but if you travel from the most western EMS station to the corner of the county, then back downtown Wichita, I don't think that's 30 minutes. I think it's something longer than that.
Well, time you respond, yes, but time you're at the scene.
At the scene to the hospital is 30 minutes.
Correct.
Right. I agree with that, okay? But you got to get to the scene. That takes time. And then you got to get to the hospital. That takes time. If someone's bleeding to death, that's a serious issue. I don't know this for a fact, but I would venture to say, I'll bet there have been people who have died in transport. Probably. Because they couldn't get to the hospital quickly enough. If that's true, then the patient outcome was different. And this service would have potentially saved a life. Potentially. We don't know. I'm not God. I don't know how this stuff works. But my point is, we used to transport 5 to 10. Now we transport virtually 0. Something's changed. I don't know why that is, but there are people out there that would benefit from this. The patient outcome would be different. They do a tremendous job. I love our EMS. I love Dr. Gallagher. You guys do tremendous. I started out with that. You guys do great. I'm so proud of our EMS. One of the best in the entire nation, I'm convinced. But if someone's patient outcome is different because they're able to get to the hospital at 140 miles an hour, direct flight to the top of the hospital, where the operating room is sitting right inside the door, that could save a life, and it has in the past. And if someone transports somebody that wasn't critically necessary, it's not our problem. I mean, I don't want to rack up a bill. Ultimately, if you know the outcome in every single case, you make the right decision. We don't know that. It's all the best judgment of those people on scene to make the best call. If they choose to transport by ground and they die, maybe that wasn't the best call. If they're on scene and they're already, is it code black? Is that the right word? Mm-hmm. They don't transport. If they are on scene and it's not critical, life-saving, they won't transport. They don't transport broken bones. They don't transport stitches. They transport people who are in the process of dying. And the question is, why hasn't this been working for the last few years? Well, if everything's in place, I would be surprised if the medical society or the medical board or Dr. Baxter would think this is good. If there's something that hasn't been engaging this issue, and maybe there's been a lack of awareness, perhaps. But now I'm aware. I think the reality is, if this is necessary to make it all happen, great. If it's not necessary to make it all happen and everything else is in place, great. You all tell me the answer to that question. But whatever it's going to take, I think we need to allow those types of services to transport people in critical issues to get them to the hospital as quickly as possible. If that's working with our existing language, I will back off. If it's not true, if we need a resolution to clarify our coordination with these folks, then it's necessary. I don't know the answer to those questions, but I would tell you that it hasn't been working for the last few years. Again, it's not because we didn't try, but if there's been people who've died in the ambulance on the way to the hospital, that proves the point that again, maybe not if they're a block down the street, helicopter wouldn't make a difference. But if they're on the corner of the county and they die on the way to the hospital, that's a case where an air ambulance might have made a difference. And I think we have enough calls per year. Surely this happens. Again, it used to be 5 to 10 per year. It's not a significant hit to us. It is a private sector opportunity. We just need to let it happen. And if everything's in place, cool. If it's not, let's fix it.
Well, what we pay our staff for and the manager for is to take a look at our policies and procedures from 911, from Dr. Gallagher's office, from our EMS, and make sure that everything's in place, that we save those patients. And I think that's their job. I don't know that we need a resolution to tell them how to do their job. What we need to do is tell them, take a look at all of the policies and procedures that you have in place right now, and is there something that's lacking in those policies and procedures that we need to add to make sure that we serve our citizens. We don't need a resolution to do that. We need to tell the manager to do that. Commissioner.
I have a question from legal as far as what's the best route that we're going to do this? I mean, do we need to have a contract? Would it be better to have a contract with them, a resolution to cover ourselves, or, I mean, we have resolutions and contracts with lots of people for everything we do. We have we have a resolution and a contract with City of Wichita for EMS, so.
We do, and we used to have a contract for air ambulance service. So, you know, I'll get with Mr. Stamper, and we'll see if there's some liability issue that we need to protect the county on or whatever. We'll take a look at it and get back with you.
I might point out too, in Kansas, there's a mutual aid compact that already exists, meaning we can ask for mutual aid from different entities we don't have contracts with them unless that particular entity in Kansas opts out, they're automatically opted in. For example, I can call Clearwater EMS, say, come help me, and we don't have a contract with them, they'll come help me. Mount Hope EMS, Butler County EMS, I can solicit help from a variety of folks in the state of Kansas because that already exists. You might look into that compact to see if we're covered in a mutual aid request.
So my other question is, what's the harm in doing a resolution?
What's the need?
My question is, what is the harm in doing a resolution? We spent a lot of time, staff time and everything behind the scenes trying to come up with a reason why we can't pass a resolution. I mean, I don't know.
So we need a resolution on trimming trees. I mean, where do we stop on coming up with resolutions?
Commissioner, this is EMS. This is air medical stuff.
And
this is not trimming
we've heard
trees.
from Dr. McMaster, we've heard from Dr. Gallagher, we've heard from Scott Hadley. We don't know right now if we need some kind of a contract with them, which
I'm
our
still
legal
asking the question, what's the harm? What's
right
the
now.
harm? This is not trimming trees. And for you to make it sound like they're similar, that's ridiculous. What is the harm?
No, what's ridiculous
We
is saying
spent hours and hours of staff time trying to find a reason just not to pass this thing. Just put it on the agenda, we'll vote for it. But let's not, I mean, it's not going to bring any harm to anybody. And there is a problem here. We have to acknowledge there's got to be a problem here.
I acknowledge
I
there's
want the
a,
people in my district to have this as an option.
and they have it as an option.
Okay.
They have it as an option.
And what's it gonna
Where have you
pass
heard
as
they
res-
do not have it as an option?
This looks like to me they really don't. From a practical standpoint, they don't.
And during that period of time, have we expanded our EMS? Have we added resources? Have we done a lot of things to make our EMS better?
Yes, we have. I want this for my district. If you don't want it, that's fine.
I didn't say I didn't want it. I said it's already in place. We don't need a resolution.
It's not in place. Something is wrong. Look at the numbers.
I strongly disagree with you.
Commissioner, don't let... You need to keep an open mind, okay? You don't
I've
need
got
to
an
just
open mind.
oppose things arbitrarily, okay? Let's understand what's going on here. Just to step back and think about if your or your loved one is out there in the county and you need this, then you're going to want it. You're going to wish they had it.
And they've
the fact
got
that
it.
Jim Howe brought it up shouldn't matter one iota.
And they've
So
got
let's
it.
just- They don't.
Thank you. Commissioners, anyone else have any questions?
I just have one question. This resolution, is it specific to any one company?
No.
Any ambulance company we could use with that resolution?
Yes.
And any ambulance company that we think would be appropriate, maybe somebody in Harvey County or something, you could call them also, right now?
Right now, yes.
Okay.
Is this on the agenda right now? I haven't looked at the agenda yet. Is it on the agenda?
We haven't reviewed the agenda yet for next week.
The plan was
It's
to
not
put
for
on
tomorrow.
next week's agenda. It's
Okay.
not on tomorrow's.
I would request we put it on the agenda. We can have this discussion in an open meeting and vote on it. Whether you think it's necessary or not, that's fine. You can all can vote no if you don't think it's necessary. I think it is.
We always respect our commissioners and put something on an agenda that a commissioner requests. We will put it on the agenda. I can tell you right now that I probably vote no.
That's fine.
Thank you.
We're
we're being asked to put something on agenda, do you have a date that you want?
I think next week is fine. Next week is fine.
Will you have a chance to review whether or not we need contracts and so forth by then?
With, Kevin, and I would like to visit with the folks who are from Eagle Med and see how they work and what contracts they might have with other entities.
Do you want us to speak to Life Team too, or the other air services, or just Eagle Med?
Do you call Life Team also?
It's not a contract, no, I want to talk with them about it.
If requested, Eagle Med is our deferred user. And just because of proximity, but my
Okay.
team can be called if Eagle Med's not available.
But I understand Life Team is going to move down to Jabara, is last I heard.
That is correct. That's correct.
So they have equal opportunity, that's fine.
So we need procedures once they move down to Jabara, or even now, whether or not, which one that you're going to call.
I'm going to mention in here now that it would need to be modified or updated.
Yeah. Very good.
Sir, I have one question. If on the actual resolution that, on item A, says that no one shall operate an emergency medical service or ambulance service, medical service in the county without first having obtained a license therefore. So what's that process?
Do all the air ambulances have a license to operate in the state of Kansas?
We do.
I would say they got a license.
But there's another resolution that establishes a procedure to obtain a license in the county that was executed in 1994.
That resolution is from 1994.
It is, sir.
Does it
It
say
says there's a process to get a license from the county, us regulating who can operate within the county.
If we're calling them now, they must have the license, if that's true.
I don't think they have a license from us.
Well, then, we're not following that policy apparently.
So that's,
How
item A would
hard, how hard is it to get a license according to that?
well, you have to have a public hearing and there's, I don't know where the forms are at. I don't know what the license looks like, because no one's ever, to my knowledge, in my tenure, applied for a license or went through this process established in the 1994 resolution.
Well, then, we need to modify that to say if they're licensed for the state of Kansas, that's all they need.
That's perfect.
That's easy.
But anyway, I just wanted to bring it to your attention. That's that language in there, and there's a resolution in place now that.
Well, all you got to do is on item A, change obtain a license from the state of Kansas, and instead of get rid of therefore, that's covered.
Yeah, I just wanted to bring that up.
Mr. Yost, do you have a question?
No. So the August 1st would be when this would be seen. Next week would be a budget hearing, and I don't see this as a consent agenda item, so we'd push it to August 1st.
And by August 1st, 911, Dr. Gallagher, EMS, all legal can review everything that we need to review to make sure everything is okay.
That gives us 2 weeks. I think that's
Okay.
probably plenty enough time. We'll come back to you if it's not.
Good. Well, Mr. Manager, what else has to come before our board today, our staff meeting today?
That's all we have.
That's all you have. What do you have next week?
Next week, for the 24th, we're going to do Rusty's going to present, along with his team of analyzers, the fire response analysis. So we're going to talk about that, which should be a fairly lengthy meeting, but that's what we're going to do next week.
Sounds good. Commissioner Howell, anything else?
No, sir.
Commissioner O'Donnell?
No, sir.
Anything?
Not for me.
Commissioner Ransau, anything?
No.
No? All right. Any of our staff at the table have anything further? Anyone else in the room? Any of our electeds?
Good.
Well, I'll be darned. Well, again, sorry about the room, but I think it worked out well. So,
It's a nice room.
yeah,
I kind of like it in here.
Chairs are more comfortable.
Kind of better than that room.
yeah. Chairs are more comfortable. All right, we're adjourned. Thank y'all.